Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout, everybody. If we haven't had a chance to meet before, I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit. And I am going to keep adding this in here because I learned from a friend at the Hangout that it's helpful for me to actually let people know that Posit is the company formerly called our studio. So we build enterprise solutions and open source tools for people who do data science with both R and Python. And Libby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Libby. I am helping out Rachel with the community stuff here with the Hangout, helping host. And I also work with Posit Academy to help people learn R and Python to do better work with data in their jobs.
So happy to have you all joining us today. The Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across all different industries, to chat about data science leadership and connect with others who are facing similar things as you. So we get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this as a recording on YouTube in the future and you want to join us live, there will be details to add it to your own calendar below. If you ever have any issues adding it or connecting in with us, please let me know. Don't hesitate to reach out on LinkedIn or email me. I'll put my email somewhere where someone can see it too. I realize I can't put it in the chat if I'm talking about YouTube. But thank you so much to those who have helped make this the friendly and welcoming space that it is today. And we're all dedicated to keeping it that way. So if you ever have feedback about your experience that you'd like to share with me anonymously, good and bad, or maybe suggestions for topics to dive deeper on, I'm going to share a Google form with you in the chat here. And I would love to hear your feedback there. And as mentioned, you can always reach out directly on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, absolutely. We love hearing from you. And we love hearing about your experiences here in the Hangout and all of your questions. This is a discussion that's driven by the audience, right? By us as a community. No matter your years of experience, your title, your industry, what language you work in, we want to hear from you. And I really encourage you to connect with others in the chat, which means introduce yourself briefly, say hi, what's your role, where are you based, what do you like to do for fun, and definitely share your LinkedIn link or your website link because we want to be able to find each other and stay connected after this hour leaves, or after this hour finishes, I should say, because it goes by really quickly. There's 3 ways to jump in and ask questions today. So you can raise your hand in the Zoom chat. We can call on you. You can put your question in the Zoom chat. And if you can't answer it, or if you can't ask it, if you like your mic is not working or you're somewhere really loud, you can put an asterisk next to it. We'll ask it for you. And then there's also a Slido link that Isabella just put in the chat. And that's where you can ask questions anonymously, which is totally fine as well.
Before we get in and do an introduction for our featured leader, I wanted to make sure we shared a recent blog post that Libby had written last week and published, which shares career advice that has been shared here in the Hangout. And Libby, do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat. I'm really excited to be able to sort of amplify the voices that we have on the Hangout because I feel like all of our guests and our participants and our community members are so brilliant and smart and amazing. And there's so much wisdom trapped in these episodes that people attend live or like are up on YouTube. And I really want to share them with the world. So this is the first one. It's pieces of career advice that really resonated with me. I hope that they will resonate with you too. And I will continue to do this, share this wisdom, and keep going. If there's something that you would like to have a blog post made about, let me know. Let me know if you're interested in something like, and I'd also really love to know, put it in the chat or ping me on LinkedIn or something. If there's ever been a piece of advice or something you've heard on a Hangout that's really stuck with you, I would really love to know about it.
Thank you. Well, with all that, thank you again for joining us today. I'm so excited to be joined by our co-host, our other co-host, Stanislav Seltser, VP of Enterprise Architecture and AI Infrastructure at State Street Global Advisors. And Stanislav, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role to get us started, but also something that you like to do outside of work for fun.
Yeah, so my name is Stanislav Seltser. So I work at SSGA, that's a division of State Street. And I lead a group that focuses on infrastructure and AI and data science. So we don't do data science ourselves, but our primary users are data scientists or economists or financial engineers, whatever you want to call them. So it's a variety of people with different backgrounds who are really interested in solving problems of economics and finance and predictive analytics. So I'm there just to really help them facilitate doing their job and make transformation from ideas to actual operations smooth. Well, outside of my job, I'm really interested in the ping pong. I'm crazy about ping pong. I just won a company tournament in the ping pong, and I play in a club in the ping pong tournaments, and I also do triathlon as well in my spare time. So kind of like split my time back and forth between triathlon and ping pong. A really good exercise, keep me in shape and challenged.
I love that. I thought you were going to tell us about biking, so I'm excited to learn more about ping pong too.
Yeah, biking is a part of triathlon. So I did a couple local triathlons in Boston 3 times already, and I did some mountain biking in California. So that was in San Francisco. So that was very exciting and challenging. But yeah, happy to share more details if people are interested. That was a heck of a trip going to San Francisco Marine Headlands if you've never been there.
Thank you. So Stanislav, a lot of times in the data science hangout, conversations come up about how do we ask for approval for new tools and how do we approach our IT organization. And I think it's really exciting to have you on the call to be able to share the experience from that side of the house as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when we were talking before, you shared with me the company is not going to invest in a tool just because a bunch of people like it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what have you found to be most helpful when pushing an idea or new technology forward? And what advice could you give to us?
So I think uh, usually in organizations, like when we see in somebody like doing startup, right? So you put together a business plan and you put together a technical prototype, right? So these 2 pieces together show your idea in action, and they also show, what's it worth in the future. So in the companies, it works in a very similar way. So you have internal decision-making teams, which kind of function like, in my opinion, like a VC. So you need to think about the presentation, like, non-technical presentation and technical. So ideally, you prototype something and make it as an example that shows what the capabilities are. I think if you merely propose something, that's really not sufficient. So, like, essentially, when you're looking to get something into organization, you need to find somebody who really feels this is necessary. And that person is driving the company principal business. So, like say, in case of financial companies, that would be a financial engineer. If you go to any other company, like pharmaceutical, that would be a pharmaceutical engineer. So they really need to be your peer partner to help you push the technology forward. And I think that's how we got all the adoption of all the new technologies in the bank. We always partner with somebody, and it's not easy actually to find people. So you need to have some digging and sales and marketing on your own to actually understand what people are doing and how they go about the jobs, where the points are. So just merely approaching, CEO, CTO with your idea, it doesn't really work. So oftentimes it's best to talk to your managers, to your peers, and prototype, even on your personal PC, even outside the company, just to show that you tried it yourself and you get some understanding of technology as somebody who's proposing it.
Yeah, that really resonated to me when we were chatting earlier when you said companies work like a VC. And so when you're bringing in this new idea, they're going to be looking at what's the least risk and maximum value for them.
You're not the only one who's bringing the ideas, right? So it's like, okay, if you think of yourself, right, you're an investor, right? You can invest into, there's so many attractive options you can do, right? So you can invest into risky enterprise, or you can buy, U.S. government bonds, or you can buy, index, S&P 500 index stock. So you have so many ideas that have different, risk characteristics to them. So as an investor, right, you put yourself into that position. You have options, and you're going to considering this option when you're weighting something, right? And you need to become. I think the whole premise of finance is that you need to be compensated for the risk, right? So when you're proposing something, people who are going to fund you are going to think about the risk, and they're going to say, okay, what I'm going to get in exchange for the risk. And that is a question that you need to be ready to answer,
Absolutely. So I think for this group here to learn a little bit more about some of the work that your team does, it might be helpful. Could you tell us a little bit about the ways that your team uses Posit, but also Shiny on the team?
So we use a variety of tools. So I think the Posit was a dominant force, and still is, for our data scientists. So I think R was a main language for many engineers are coming out of college with graduate degrees in finance and economics. And so most of the people that we work with would be familiar with that, with our libraries and methodologies related to the financial modeling. So the R was very widely adopted, and so we use Posit as a tool. Primarily, first of all, because it has a very nice debugger built in. The UI was integrated with Git, which is important for IT processes. And it has a nice browser and ability to build packages and all this kind of stuff. So was there. So now we're a little bit expanding. So I think we're looking at the market trends. So Python is really dominating the data science market. So we're shifting towards expanding tools. So Visual Studio is our second main development tool, alongside with Jupyter Notebooks. The Posit is still there. So Posit will be there. So we use Shiny R as a library where users can really easy design their own applications. So that has appeal, because IT doesn't have to be involved in developing application. So somebody who's really doesn't know that much about programming with Shiny R can relatively easy put together a relatively sophisticated application. Not to mention that you can use nowadays LLMs to actually generate application, the whole Shiny R application, and deploy it on your PC and show it to somebody really quickly. So there's appeal. So there's a Shiny Python now too. So we're looking into that. And the good thing about Shiny is that somebody who really doesn't, like I said, really is not a software engineer, professional software engineer, can not only develop application, but you can actually, if you buy enterprise version of POSIT, you can easily upgrade to things which are required by IT standards, like single sign-on, authentication, authorization, also integration with the corporate security and so on. So that's a big thing. So automation of non-technical users, software engineering processes, right? So still non-technical users have to be able to show what they want to do, right? So whether they're using Excel or they're using POSIT or whatever, they're just like us, like IT. So they have to demonstrate the ideas on a small scale, right, before it goes on a big scale.
Absolutely. And so I know we talked before a little bit about how Shiny gives people the freedom to experiment, and how if you're not allowing people that freedom, it might stifle their creativity. But I'm curious, like, how do you inspire creativity across the organization?
Well, I think there's multiple aspects to that. So I think essentially the long-term goal for us is to kind of, I wouldn't say totally minimize the role of IT, but maybe kind of make it easier and easier for people to kind of dream up things and describe them in English and transform them to applications as quickly as possible. I think we are an investment bank, so investment banks are very, very much research oriented. So that means we're producing research papers, we're producing results that we publish, and this research papers eventually transform into mutual funds and other financial products that we deliver to market every year. So the speeding up the process from idea to the product, that's what we're trying to do. And basically being able to let people test the stuff in a relatively short time, that's what the ultimate goal is. So, if somebody comes up with a strategy, they should be able to validate that strategy, quickly and as cheaply as possible. So that's our goal, is to, everybody has a budget. So if you strive to do things cheaply, economically, and efficiently, that allows more people to try things. And, try more ideas, and more people just generally experiment with technologies. The data science market is very, very agile. And so for a bank, you also have to stay abreast of the technologies and constantly evaluate what's happening on the market, just so the bank stays on the cutting edge of the technology itself.
Definitely. Libby, I see you had a question. Do you want to jump in here next?
I would love to, because I feel like I need a more simple explanation of the types of problems that you solve so I can understand exactly what you do. So explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. I would love to know what type of problems you solve, or what type of problems your end users solve if you are like building tools.
So we have, I think half of the workforce of the bank is researchers.
Okay.
Researchers in economics and finance. So the problems that they're solving, pretty much every researcher is a portfolio manager or researcher in economics, and they work with portfolio manager. So what they do is they run mutual funds, they run hedge funds, they run ETF products. So, and the goal for them, right, is to be able to achieve performance. Right, so you sell somebody ETF, that ETF shows reasonably good performance, right? So achieving performance means you predicting the future. Okay, so if you're running mutual funds, you're constrained by the investors. They're going to tell you what the risk characteristics are, and the profile, how long they're willing to invest. And it's your job to think about what's going to happen in the future and where to invest money into. So forecasting the future is actually incredibly difficult because you don't know so many things, right? So you may be observing some things, like you're observing prices on stock exchange, but you don't know what's driving, what's underlying forces. So that's a challenge, a really fundamental challenge, and it's actually for every market, whether you invest in stocks or you invest in bonds or you invest in cash or you invest in ETF, the challenge is different because the forces are driving too. But overall, things are interrelated, right? So if there is some geopolitical event that's going to impact everything at different races. So usually you see things happening quickly on macroeconomic level, right? So interest rates go up. Why does interest rate go up? Well, interest rates go down. So right. So what we're thinking about, why is this things happening, and where this is going to turn around or change direction. So it's a long-term planning, right? So think about long-term planning, long-term forecasting. You're not investing for we're not real-time trading shop. So I think predicting future, the farther you go, right? So maybe you'll think what you're going to do tomorrow, but predicting future 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And for us, is predicting technology, where the technology is going to go in, that period of time. So somebody's going to, like our partners, is going to think about where the finance part is going to turn around, how the market is going to react to things. And we think what technology we need to pick, right? So, and think about it, once you pick something, you cannot change it easily because it's just going to be, lots of people is going to use it, and it will be next to impossible to change it. So you need to be really, really careful and thoughtful. And when you're picking underlying technology for researchers to use, right? So maybe picking up modeling language. I think that's one actually choice with a big impact, right? So there's so many languages. Like you have Julia, you have R, you have Python, you have Rust. So you're making a trade-off decision, right? So somebody comes in and they don't know programming. They're not software engineers. The economists, the financial experts, maybe they have a degree in philosophy. I don't know. So it's in dealing with non-technical sales force, and kind of you're trying to pick a technology for them that will be very generic and will be supported. So that's one of the things we think about. What is the best strategy, right? So if you buy proprietary tool, right? You use commercial proprietary tool, company goes out of business. What's going to happen to us? Who's going to support? Right. So for that reason, we generally, I think, last probably 15 years, we've been slowly using open source tools with commercial support. So POSIT perfectly fits into that category. So they support Python R, they provide R-Studio, and they give us commercial support, which is what we need when things go, sometimes things go wrong. And so that's what you need was a big organization, commercial support. And what we noticed that if you buy really good proprietary stuff, eventually it dies. End of life is inevitable, not just for people, but also for software. And it actually happens much faster than you really think about it. And so the goal for us is to predict when this is going to happen, how quickly, and what can we do to defend ourselves. So I think that's, if you're asking what's the challenge for us, is that picking up the tools and figuring out how long is it going to last?
Thank you.
I really appreciate that explanation too, and thinking about proprietary tools versus open source as well. I realize I see everybody's comments in the chat and everybody introducing themselves, and I realized something I forgot to add in the beginning. If anyone is hiring for roles across your team, feel free to share those in the chat as well. I just want to make sure everyone knows that the chat can be used for that purpose as well. Thank you. So Stanislav, something that we were talking about in the very beginning of the Hangout when Libby was mentioning her career advice post is we love to learn from different leaders who join us. What's a memorable piece of career advice that you've received or given that you'd like to share with us?
I think, like, if you're really looking for career, I think the first thing is building networking, so being social, connecting with as many people as you can. That's my advice number one. So presenting when you can, going to meetups and presenting and being a good speaker. That's number one. And number two, I would say, is that helping other people to succeed in their jobs will also help you to succeed as an influencer and motivator. So inside the SSGA, we're very big on that. So like we mentor people, and the senior executive mentor us. So I think that's very powerful, create very powerful cohesion within the company. And second, I would say collaborating with people. I think in the 21st century, I think like if you think like look at 90s and 80s when US was outsourcing, a lot of work overseas, and I think in the 21st century, it doesn't really matter where you are. So what matters is collaboration and your skills. So that's I think is going to change. Like obviously AI has some impact to that, but I don't think as much as really focusing on collaboration with different people and different groups is kind of going to teach you different skills. So that's my take on career advice. So some people make career changes pretty often, and some people make career changes, I would say, not so often. So if you make career changes often, like I would say every 2-3 years, the problem is you don't get to focus on big things. You focus on relatively small things. So to make big changes happen in an organization, to make impact, you really need time to sell your ideas to organization, to deliver them, to train people, and maintain and support after. So that's a general trade-off that I would say you need to think about it when you make frequent career changes. But building a network, I think, probably most about. Obviously, making a skill. So for me personally, I like to focus on a small set of skills, but really deep. So Python, R, Rust, AI, PyTorch. So that's machine learning. So the areas that I'm focusing, I'm trying to go really, really deep. Not to go too wide, just focus on things that I really can be an expert on, right? So if somebody asking me a question about ML model, I'm able to read it, diagnose it, and correct it relatively short amount of time. Somebody asks me about R code, why it's not working, I'm able to debug it and figure out what is wrong with it. So that's, to me, I think you really need to have very disciplined focus on what you're doing. And it needs to be kind of sort of deep and very hard. I mean, and I'm actually professor of associate professor of computer science at BU as well. So to me, learning is kind of continuous process. So you need to think about that. Not only because technology changes for people for us who are in technology, technology is changing, so you have to be continuously learning. But also for yourself, just generally challenge yourself to different things, because you're in the market for a long time, like 30 years, 25 years.
Thank you. I see there was a Slido question someone had asked anonymously, and it was when you were talking about forecasting for when tools would go obsolete. And so they said, interesting forecasting problem. What are some factors you use to forecast when a tool would go obsolete?
So the first thing I think is a red flag for us is when people stop committing to the tool. So when let's say if you use something even like open source, right? And you go to GitHub and you look how many people commit. How many people make commits to the tool. So if you see that the rate of commitment is dropping, that's a red flag. So generally, when we use any open source package, for example, right, we monitor that metric. How often people commit. So if somebody didn't commit, let's say there's a package and somebody didn't commit for a year, okay, we know that thing is in trouble. Maybe maintainer died, or nobody's interested. Something is up there. So we did a general investigate. If it's non-open source, if it's proprietary, the way we look at it is how often vendors deliver releases, and if these releases are maintenance releases or they bring up innovation features. So usually market leaders deliver releases every quarter. And with those releases, the healthy company will deliver a mix of new features and maintenance, right? So if they just go on to maintenance, let's for 6 months or a year, that's a red flag. So going to customer conferences and talking to companies, right, also can show you, right, whether the number of customers increasing or decreasing. You can just look how many people come to conference. Technology upgrades, right? So I'm not going to give you a name, but we had a vendor for 10 years. So he was bought by a bigger vendor, and the bigger vendor just stopped upgrading underlying compilers. They were using the same compiler. So compilers actually, I would say, every year there's a release from, let's say, GCC compiler, every year there's a release. So if the vendor is relying on their product and the compiler, and they just stop upgrading the compiler, and you see that, okay, 2-3 years, same compiler. That's a red flag. So just not even if the underlying technology doesn't change at all, so we kind of get worried, and maybe underlying engineering team is shrinking, or maybe the company just wants to use. So usually what you see product dying on the marketplace when somebody buys it, right? And they just want to use the product for, just a cash flow, right? And they just run it until cash flow, until customer are paying. So that is a place where we don't want to be. And it's hard to actually predict when somebody's going to buy somebody. So this has happened all the time. So tomorrow, POSIT could be bought by a bigger company, right? That's okay. So, but what we would be worried if our studio releases would slow down in the frequency. I think that would be.
We can't though, because we're a public benefit corporation.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, okay. So OpenAI is also a public benefit corporation, but nonetheless, Microsoft invested $10 billion. And people are leaving OpenAI. So like, okay, so there's some concerns there, right?
I think there's a lot of thoughts here starting to come in the chat around this topic. So I want to make sure that people can jump in too. And Chris, I see you had to ask something about exceptions. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, is my mic working properly?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. I was wondering earlier on, you had mentioned about the rate and frequency of like GitHub commits.
Yeah.
Are there any as that's a general, are there any exceptions to that? Is there anything out there that behaves like perhaps stably, or doesn't really have like a constant update? What I'm curious, I'm thinking of, and I have no data on this, but I'm thinking of like Spark itself. I'm wondering, like, does something like that perhaps have a slow burn in terms of commit rate or not? I was curious if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, so Spark is one of the main tools that we monitor very, very actively. And we actually have commercial version of it through Databricks. So the Spark has, I would say, over 200 committers. And those committers are not individual people, they're companies. So usually what you see is that if you look at the where the people are working on, you see major companies, you see Intel, you see Apple, you see Microsoft, you see IBM. Databricks is obviously dominates, but these companies are not basically when you see committers like that, that means committers are using open source internally. All right, they're using open source internally, they're running internally, they're running operations, and they're making changes based on a feedback, right? If they were just like users, okay, maybe users will make some suggestions to the vendors, like IBM or Databricks. The users probably will not make changes, right, to the product like that. But the people who make changes means they're really, really thinking about cost, right? How do you make things more efficiently? How do you add more features? And that's a good thing. That means that is thriving, right? So for example, recently we saw there was like 2 major releases went very quickly within, I would say, a year. There was a 3.4 and 3.5 versions. And we generally look at the discussions that people have on a public Jira, because it really gives you insight into what's coming, right? So usually if you go to the vendors, commercial vendors, and you say what's coming, say, oh, it's a secret, blah, blah. Well, if you're backed by public source, right, and people committing to it, it's not a secret what's coming down the line. You can see it in the discussions. If you summarize discussions, if you summarize, if you look at Jira comments that people make, you can actually see where things are going. So, like, I think recently there's a big change in the Spark where Databricks stopped supporting Spark R and they switched to POSIT Sparkly. POSIT now official partner. That change was not announced and publicly until like Databricks AI conference in June this year. But if you read the Jira comments carefully, you would see that coming very clearly. And we did saw that, like I would say in February, March, we already knew this is what's going to happen, even before they publicly announced this change. So I guess congratulations to Posit for quickly picking up the slack. But I think from perspective of, again, I think it's one of the advantages using open source with the commercial support. You can actually see what's happening. You can see what's happening with the products, where they're going. You can look at developing branches, right, before they make it to the main branches, and you can see the future. So that's gives you ability to plan, right? So one of the things for us is ability to plan forward. We like to plan for a long time, and we don't like surprises. So that's important for us to be able to monitor open source ecosystem and see what's happening under the hood and where things are moving towards.
Wow, thank you.
I actually wanted to share here because in the hangout with Chris Engelhardt at Genry, there was a conversation in the chat about people wishing that they could publish pins to Databricks, I believe. And like since that hangout, I know this PR has been merged on GitHub. So I just wanted to share that here if anybody was looking for that and I missed them in a LinkedIn message.
There is a Databricks user group meeting, I think, next week. And I'll be giving a talk there as well.
Oh, awesome. In downtown Boston?
It's in Boston, yeah.
Okay, cool. Libby, do you want to pull someone in for the next question?
I would love to. We have a question that's actually asked with an asterisk by it, so I'm going to read it. It may need some extra context, but I'm going to do my best. So the question was, wouldn't the amount of bugs open/closed be a more direct metric on quality? So a good package may not need many new commits, but new issues shouldn't be compiling. And with not many bugs, maintainer responsiveness would sound key.
I mean, if you have too many bugs to begin with, that's a red flag by itself, in my opinion. And yeah, the responsibility of maintainers, I think, is important because one of the reasons we like commercial support because we can ask vendors, but if the vendors don't respond, then you go ask, public for support. And so we can measure directly as a maintainer responsiveness of was the communities even there to begin with. All right, so the last thing we want to do is sometimes you have to roll things, you have to roll the sleeves and fix things yourself. So like I give you example, I have a post about this on the LinkedIn, you can look it up. LangChain is extremely popular framework for doing, AI applications. And they have so many chains, which is basically integrations between LLM and other technologies. So, example, they have, LangChain between, Postgres database and OpenAI. So you can use OpenAI and Postgres database together, but they ask, the function of the system, so singular system. Now, when you start using the stuff like that in your application, and let's say you're using LLM to generate SQL, what you find is a lot of stuff is not really tested or working as you expect, 100% of the time. So when you go to commercial setting, people generally expect things to work, right? 100% reliably. So if you advocate for things which are kind of really not working fully, it may end up with you. You may have to be responsible and doing the fixes. So in that particular case, we've been looking, okay, can we define a set of sub modules that we can fix ourselves and deliver them back to the community? So that's a part of that game, that, you know, if you use open source and people don't respond, you have to go and fix it yourself. I think that's you being a software engineer. You stop being a user, you start being an active participant. So we actively participate in general in the ecosystem. We've been heavily testing this database called Chroma. I don't know if any of you are familiar. That's basically a free library for doing embeddings on your PC. And it's basically allows users to prototype embeddings, you know, without having GPU. You can just use CPU. But it's pretty buggy. There's lots of bugs, especially in the Windows environment. Maybe Linux. Linux is they're doing a lot of testing, but maybe Windows less. So we do testing. We contribute. We understand that open source community, people don't always have time to test, and different scenarios, different combinations, operating systems, and so on and so forth. So the value is that sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves, right? So and just do things yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I know I have just about 10 minutes, and I see a few other questions, so I want to make sure I get to those as well. And Mauro, would you want to jump in here next with your question?
Sure. Yeah. I noticed that you mentioned that it's really hard to get out of a bad technology because some or many users might like it. So my question is if you have any advice to avoid people getting into a technology that you already identify as not being a good candidate, or if you're already stuck in there, if there's any advice that you can get people out of that technology without I don't know, hurting people. How do you even do it? Like, how do you have that conversation?
I think like the way we look at technology, right? For us, the first and most important thing is usability, right? So if you see something that's not usable, that's probably the first thing that indicates you don't go there. Okay. Usable means easy to learn, easy to test, easy to maintain, right? So, and cheap, right? So if it's expensive, like, yeah, it's expensive, it's better be, worth the money. So I think you think that way, right? So we invested a lot of effort into R, and R is not really, easy to use. It doesn't have a built-in debugger, for example. So when you're trying to debug something, and let's say you don't have RStudio, you have a pressure, right? You have operational pressure to fix a problem. You could be in a hell lot of trouble because of that. The other thing is that when you look at community size, sheer community size, right? So again, compare R to Python. If you look at a number of packages that is on PyP, I think it's Python is PyP close to 700,000 packages. And you look at the number of packages on CRAN, 30,000. So it's not even order of magnitude. It's almost 2 orders of magnitude, right? So when there is a big community behind something, I think it kind of indicates to you where the market is going to go. So if you pick up something that's kind of an edge, you may find yourself with something that's slowly dying over time. It's not productive, right? I think one of the reasons we picked Databricks because to the community there is so active around Spark, right? And our main business is data science. So Databricks for us, it's a platform for all things data science, right? So the way we look at it, okay, if you're doing, operational reporting, maybe you're better off with not Databricks, but maybe Oracle or Snowflake or some other vendors. But if you're doing analytics on a big scale, that is platform for you. So I'm not trying to sell Databricks or anything, but just example, right? So how we think about, the technology has to fit for what you're doing, right? And so there's all these aspects, okay, cost and usability and maintainability, and whether that's going to enhance your personally, market skills, all the stuff. But at the end, what matters was the product you choose, it gives you ROI, right? So that's actually a very hard thing to live up to. When you use something, does it gives you ROI for what you invested or not, right? I think you need to think a bit from that perspective. What is my long-term ROI?
I know.
And,
oh, sorry. You go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add on the ROI piece?
Yeah, I was just thinking of a good example. So again, just personal anecdote, but I really used to like Android phones because they were very, very cheap, right? And they were open source and all this stuff. And then eventually, at some point, I actually switched to iPhone. And so iPhone, is expensive, closed system, right? And it has a lot of disadvantages. However, what you look at iPhone, that keeps the value, right? It keeps the value, and if you look at the long term, let's say 5 years, what you will see is that Apple is doing releases. Every quarter they're doing releases, maintenance releases, and once a year they do feature release, right? And if you look at Android, what you will see is that number of releases that deliver new features is actually much smaller. So that is ROI, keeping the value and keeping up with feature maintenance, feature release, feature delivery. And I'm so surprised that even old iPhones continue to keep value. Where if you get like Android, Samsung, which cost exactly the same as iPhone, the value there is, initial value cost of buying it is very close. But over time, you will see decline is much steeper in resale value. So that's telling you something, right? That's telling you how the companies take what's attitude towards the product, long-term product maintenance.
So I just wanted to share real quickly. Isabella shared a link to a blog post in the chat, which actually came from a data science hangout specifically on this communicating ROI of data science projects. So I just wanted to make sure people saw that there in the chat. But also just one more question. Saul had asked earlier and I had missed it, but it was, from your point of view, what skill do you think is worth getting deep into when it comes to learning? And what impact have you seen this skill have, or what impact do you believe it will have? And I can copy it back into the chat again because it was way up there.
So I think, again, this is my personal opinion, so it's not official anything. When I was in a PhD program at WPI, they have this class called concrete mathematics. And I was like, okay, what's concrete mathematics? Isn't mathematics is abstract by definition? And turned out to be is that what they're giving us is just a large set of problems, and they expected us to solve it. It was a very broad set of problems, right? And they expected us to solve them. And I think, to me, that was really core skills that I learned from entire PhD program. That your strength is not in one particular thing. Your strength is actually trying, solving different problems, as many as you can. And basically that is allowing you to build up, your technical skill. So like when I'm teaching classes at BU, we solve a problem from Kaggle, which is main competition website. We solve problem from ArcPuzzle, which is another main competition website. Actually, if you've never heard of ArcPuzzle, I highly recommend. It's a $1 million prize competition where they give you, I think, about 500 puzzles. And what they do is they expect you to solve the puzzles in a way that's generic. So that's actually very interesting because people say, like LLM can solve all the puzzles. And that is not true because LLM cannot solve all the puzzles. Because LLM can only solve the puzzles that other people already solved. So if you've never seen the puzzle, the chances of LLM solving it, relatively low. So actually, it's very interesting to try this ARC challenge. So I'm out of 400. I've just done 25, and just basically it's not that complicated puzzle, but when you're trying to think a bit, okay, how do I do it generically? Not just solve specific puzzles a specific way, but how do we do this generically? That's actually you understand it's a very difficult problem. So my recommendation, you want to get better, you do problems that's hard. Even if you don't solve them and you fail, you still learn something. Okay, so and then if you get really disappointed, you can go solve a little simpler problem and kind of give yourself a little reward. So for me personally, okay, solving 25 puzzles and ARC challenge, that works you out, Kaggle too. So Kaggle is a great site where they have competitions from different industries, right? And it allows you to really do learn machine learning, right? So you join the team or you form the team or whatever. That's purely machine learning. So ARC prize is more towards AI. So I try to do problems from different domains. Some problems from just pure mathematics, some problem, pure statistics, some problem machine learning, some problem from AI. So I can kind of try to get all around it in the data science because it's such a big area. Obviously infrastructure too. So Amazon classes give you plenty of puzzles too if you're into that.
So I know we have just about like 10 seconds left here, but I know you mentioned you're speaking in person in Boston next week, and I was just wanted to make sure if that link I just shared is the right event for the Databricks meetup, or if you have it handy. Sure. But I just want to say thank you so much, Stanislav, for joining us, and thank you all for joining us at the Hangout today. If you want to join us again next week, Joel Ash is going to be joining us. Joel is a senior data science manager at Kraft Heinz. And so he'll be chatting about what it's like to work in the CPG industry and the challenges of a 0 to 1 at a mature company and how to be heard instead of just listened to. And so me reaching out to Joel was actually inspired by somebody saying, hey, I would love to hear from more people in the CPG, consumer packaged goods industry. So also, if you have suggestions of voices and industries and people you'd like to hear from as well, please let me know. But thank you all so much. And Stanislav, was that the right link?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day, everybody.